What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. And today we're talking College Football DFS ahead of Week 11. We have Maction, 3-game slate this Tuesday night. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus up to $100 when you click the link in the video description below. They're also giving you one free month of OddsShopper, which is our betting platform. All sorts of tools to help you with sides, totals, and player props, which applies directly to Prize Picks. All the major sports are included over at Prize Picks: NFL, NBA, NHL, college football, as well as a ton of niche sports. That $100 bonus is huge. Can't talk today, but if you or somebody knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 to play. Link in the video description below. Hopefully the talking improves as we break down this slate. We're going to kick things off in the MAC with Ball State taking on Northern Illinois. This game is a 10-point spread in favor of Northern Illinois, 44-point total. This is updated as of Monday night, so I know Ball State has been taking a little bit of money here. You're probably going to see them close around 9-point underdogs. Weird team. We've got two slow teams. Ball State 110th in pace, Northern Illinois 100th pass rate. Ball State is 46, but this team has just completely morphed into a run-based team since they switched to Kyle Kelly. You're probably looking at a pass rate between 30 and 35% realistically under the new signal caller. Northern Illinois has a 47% pass rate. Starting with Ball State's Kyle Kelly, 6,500. He's barely throwing the ball, 8.3 attempts per game, 37.5 yards. Some of that depressed when they were using multiple signal callers in individual games, but honestly, the role's not much better than that, even in full games. He lives through efficiency on the ground. And you're going to see this again, 3 straight games with double-digit carries. He has 434 cumulative yards, which is pretty insane considering he's barely played this year. So he's a safe quarterback, but I almost treat him like a Armed Forces Academy signal caller or a triple option signal caller because of the way he's used. But I think he does have a decent floor, and the ceiling is high if he gets some rushing touchdowns. So Kyle Kelly, I think, is completely fine. Another beneficiary of the increased run rate has been Marquez Cooper, who now has carry counts of 26 and 25 in back-to-back games. He has 1 target in each of those contests as well, so not uninvolved in the pass game. Kyle Kelly has been allergic to throwing the ball downfield, so that does help Cooper when they do pass, which is rare, but at least worth noting. In the receiving game, we're just going to have a ton of volatility here. I mean, Tanner Koziel had like a 95% route rate and wasn't targeted last game. They just don't throw the ball enough to really target anybody with confidence. To break it down, you could go back to Koziel after the 0-target game, but the routes were fine. Chien Magwood was also at 89% of the routes. Ahmad Edwards was at 93%. Malcolm Gilly, 57%. They used 2 running backs more than you'd think. Marquez Cooper was at 50%. Vaughn Pemberton was at 54%, so that does not add up to 100%. They do use some 2 running back sets. Ball State's just weird right now. A lot of 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. If you're playing a receiver, I'm going to go back to Koziel, but it's tough here. I think Ahmad Edwards is right there at a cheaper price too. Magwood is a little too expensive for my liking. On the Northern Illinois side, Rocky Lombardi continues to erode as he gets older. Only has 43 rushing yards this year. Situationally, they'll use him as a rusher, which is weird. Designed attempts of 8, 7, and 4 over the last 3 games. He only averages 184 passing yards per game. The matchup's not good by any means. So Lombardi at 7K is a bit expensive for my liking, but he's definitely in play. There's enough MAC teams that don't even have quarterback clarity, so we have that at least. In the backfield, Ontario Brown sort of iced Gavin Williams. I wouldn't anticipate this every week. Gavin Williams still has a better route rate than Ontario Brown. So if this isn't likely here, but say Ball State got up in this game by 2 scores, you might not see as much Ontario Brown just because they've used Gavin Williams so much on passing downs. But still, the upside very clear with him if the opposite occurs and they're up by 2 scores or 1 score. 22 carries last week for Ontario Brown. He's averaging 94 yards per game. That's just on the ground by itself. Another 5 through the air, but again, he doesn't do that a ton. 6.2K is an affordable price tag for Ontario as a favorite in this spot by nearly double digits, so we'll be playing him along with Cooper. Receiving game, Kasper Rutkewicz has still been out, missed his third straight game. No update on his status, as is the case with most MAC schools. But in his absence, Trayvon Rudolph has target counts of 13 and 10 over the last 2 games. Just very clearly a target dominator for this Northern Illinois team. Beyond him, Davis Patterson is somewhat interesting. This is going to be a spot where I think most ownership is just going to flow through Trayvon Rudolph. But to break down their routes for the guys just behind him, Davis Patterson, 71%. Jalen Johnson, 60%. Then they use multiple tight ends. Grayson Barnes had a 63% route share. Chris Carter and Brock Lamp, who's technically a running back on DraftKings, but he's a tight end by alignment most of the time. Even Tristan Twos, like they all rotate on and off the field. So not as much interest in like a Jalen Johnson, but I think you could play a Davis Patterson for contrarian builds. It's just tough to play any of these guys. Johnson, he's cheap at 3,700 and he has the 13 targets over the last 2 games, but the routes just scare me being behind Davis Patterson routinely. So we'll see. Before we move on, I want to talk to you about our college sports package. We have the link in the video description below if you'd like to access this. For college football specifically, we have this data tool you're looking at, which just shows you a lot of opportunity metrics for players, but I find it very easy to look at and try to find some buy low spots and just know what's going on with these teams. Also player projections and ownership projections. Those can help you a ton with DFS. And there's still a lot left on the board. Multiple weeks of the regular season, conference championship, and bowl seasons almost every day. So get your feet wet. Check it out. Link in the video description below. Central taking on Western, 3.5-point spread in favor of Western. Central's taking some money here, 56.5 total. So immediately more intrigue in this game environment for DFS. Central Michigan, 92nd in pace, 45% pass rate. Western Michigan, they're 24th in pace, 48.5% pass rate. Jace Bauer looked like Michael Vick last week. Now 7,500. He's a solid player. They're just not super fast, but when they're winning games, you're going to see them embrace the run. Luckily, Bauer's involved in that. The designed attempts from Bauer are insane, though. 3, 14, 2, and 18 over the last 2 games. I think with the success we saw last game, they would be smart to continue using Bauer on the ground. 329 cumulative yards is solid. Offensive line's pretty good here for Central. The defense for Western definitely doesn't scare you. So we'll be back to Bauer. Marion Lukes, he's handled a pretty good workload since Miles Bailey went down, and we don't have any update on his injury status. But Lukes, since that injury occurred, 23 touches, 22 touches in back-to-back games. He's completely fine to use. Western allowing 4.4 yards per carry to opposing backs. In the receiving game, Tyson Davis was out for Central last game, which creates, I don't know, a little bit of a log jam because we don't know if he's going to play or not. If he's out, I think we can pretty clearly decipher this. Jesse Pruitt should be the 1, 83% of the routes. Chris Parker, the 2, 72% of the routes. And then that it gets a little gnarly after that. Pretty much a rotation. Thomas Pinunzio actually had the most routes, about 60%. And that was ahead of Bracey, McGaughey, all these other ancillary receivers. But I think we see this right back to Tyson Davis if he's active. But just for safety purposes, if you don't want to worry about the late news, I'd go to Pruitt and Parker. Tight ends are a mess. They're going to rotate 3 or 4 of them. Western, we go to Hayden Wolf under center. He's played well enough to continue to have this. Interestingly, he's basically been a negative rusher his whole career, and he has 47 yards this year. The O-line's really good for Western, so I think just not taking as many sacks has been beneficial to Hayden Wolf. Averaging 172 per game through the air. That's depressed by the quarterback roulette Western was playing earlier this year. I think out of all the signal colors on this slate, he's most live for a 300-yard bonus, and the Central defense definitely doesn't scare you. In the run game, Jalen Buckley, he's expensive, but you can definitely get to him. 25 carries in the last game. He averages 96 rush yards per game. Also involved on the ground. He has 10 targets over the last 3 games combined. He sees a little bit of work to Zahir Abdus-Salam. So the backfield isn't just locked in to Buckley. If they got down in this game or something, you're still likely looking at a committee split. Like the game prior, we had 6 carries for Buckley, 6 for Abdus-Salam. So honestly, price adjusted, I think I would prefer Ontario, Luke's assuming Bailey's out, and Marquez Cooper. but for tournaments like Buckley, there's just massive upside here. Central's run defense has been even worse than Western's, 4.9 yards per carry. Receiving game here, Austin Hentz, their tight end, missed their last game, which I think is noteworthy. He's actually pretty involved for this team. So moving on from there, you just probably won't know that until game time. The backup tight end, Blake Bosma, had a 93% route rate, at least worth noting. Some late news to monitor. Receiving game is pretty cut and dry. Kenneth Womack, Leroy Thomas are your top two options. Anthony Sambucci returned from injury. His route rate was at 64%. Still trailed the 90% Womack and Thomas. But what that really did was remove Malik Dodone, who dropped to around a 35% route rate in their last game. I think any of the top three are firmly in play. Womack being the one, Leroy Thomas the two, and then I have no issues playing Sambucci as a contrarian option. The only potential problem is that he's more expensive than Leroy Thomas. And then again, Blake Bosma, he would become a play if we lose Austin Hentz. Last game, Ohio Buffalo, 7-point spread in favor of the Bobcats, 43 total. Ohio is 105th in pace with a 51% pass rate. Buffalo, 52nd in pace with a 51.5% pass rate. Overall, the Bobcats live through efficiency, and they should find that here, especially on the ground. Buffalo allows 5.4 yards per carry. Luckily, Curtis Rourke is involved in the ground, 195 rush yards for him. Only averaging 207 yards per game on 29 attempts, but efficiency is still decent for Curtis Rourke. He is, I'm going to say QB2 for me tentatively on the slate. He's like right there, I think, with Jace Bauer. I would still rank him ahead of Hayden Wolf, Rocky Lombardi, Kyle Kelly, and Cole Snyder. It's very close, I think, between Bauer and Curtis Rourke on this slate. We'll see where projections end up, but I think, for cash games, they're pretty easy to just slide in there. In the backfield, Say Bangura and O'Shane Allison are just locked into a 50-50 committee. The potential matchup advantage here, though, I think makes me want to consider them. 5.4 yards per carry allowed for Buffalo. This defense stinks against the run. I don't think they're going to be owned with players like Marcus Cooper, Antonio Brown, and Luke's in similar price ranges. So these are pretty good GPP pivots if you're looking to gain some leverage in a good offensive environment as a touchdown favorite and just a terrible run defense. Receivers also pretty cut and dry for Ohio. This team is very nice for DFS because you know exactly where the ball is going. Sam Wigluts, Miles Cross are your top two receivers very clearly. Wigluts is at like 97% of the routes over the last 3 games. Cross isn't far behind. Tyler Walton is a bit behind. It's about 70% of the routes in 2 of the last 3 games. Did reach 90 in one of those, though. So very clearly the wide receiver 3. Tight end is a split. Tyler Foster and Will Kasmerick split that about 50-50. So I'm focusing my attention on the top 3. And honestly, I want an Ohio receiver with their volume. And none of them are expensive. All below 6K. Walton is below 5K. On the Buffalo side, there's good volume for Cole Snyder. He doesn't run a ton, 76 rush yards, largely because of sacks. Averages 189 through the air. That's on 35 attempts, so it's good volume. But I'm worried about an in-game benching at some point for Snyder. We've seen Ogbonna play not a lot, but situationally for this team. I mean, at what point did they pull the plug? So he is, I think, the most risky signal caller on the board, would rank him 6th. Backfield is a committee. You'll see Ron Cook, Mike Washington, and Jacquez Barksdale all play. Ron Cook had 17 carries in the last game. That was positive. 5 targets. If he were to get 22 touches again, he would be viable at 59. But you still saw Mike Washington carry 6 times, Jacquez Barksdale 9 times. If they don't get off a ton of plays, it's really hard for you to see this happening. And Ohio's 105th in pace. This is not a pace-up spot for Buffalo. So again, similar to Snyder, I don't have as much interest in this situation as some of the others on this slate. Receiver, you can always pick up cheap targets for this Buffalo team. While not efficient, they do throw the ball a good amount. Maryland Johnson, Cole Harity are your top 2 guys, even though you see Booby Curry up there in targets. Just as far as route shares go, it's Maryland Johnson very clearly one. He's routinely above 90%. Cole Harity is similar, so that's why I would still prefer him to Booby Curry. Beyond that, the wide receiver 3 and 4 positions are split between Curry himself and Darryl Harding. This team doesn't use a tight end on every snap, and they've been pretty injured at that position. Cameron Ball and Jake Orlando have been hurt. So they've actually played more 4 wide receiver sets, which is crazy enough. But I think when you do see tight ends on the field, it's some combination of Andrew Schnackenborg and Zion Carter, which is not something I'm going to target at all. We have cheap enough receivers where we don't need to look to those guys. All right. If you have a comment or a question, let me know below. You can also ask questions to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We'll be back tomorrow breaking down more Maction. Until then, good luck, everybody. We'll see you next time.